So there were a couple of budget smartphones that I didn't quite get around to reviewing before we all dragged ourselves wearily into 2021, and one of them was this wee blighter here, the Oppo A53. Now the A53 has already dropped in price to just 150 quid for 2021, so that means that it's already cheaper than the Motorola Moto G9 Power, and it's stiff competition for the Poco M3. Stiff. And while it's far from perfect, I actually preferred using the Oppo A53 this last week when I had my SIM slapped in there compared with those other two rivals. So here's my in-depth Oppo A53 review at last. And for more on the latest greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So fair enough, on the outside the Oppo A53 isn't the most exciting of designs. It's a fairly standard budget offering with glossy plastic construction which proves to be quite the fingerprint magnet. Seriously, this thing loves picking up greasy fingerprints more than I love meat that is stuffed inside of or wrapped around other meat. But at least because you've got that dark coloration, that does help to hide the worst of it until it catches the light just so, and then you kind of recoil with a ugh. It's one of those sounds that originates right at the back of your throat. Ugh. But this is the electric black model. If that's not quite your bag, you can also pick it up in a mint cream version, which sounds rather unappetizing, but it's there if you want a paler version. And apparently the reflective design here is inspired by the shine and translucent glimmer of ocean waves. Now I actually shifted to the Oppo A53 from the Motorola Moto G9 Power, which I only just reviewed, and the transition certainly made this phone feel like it was really light and compact and easy to handle, although at 186 grams and with a 6.5-inch screen that's surrounded by not exactly teeny bezels, it's certainly about average as far as budget blows goes for the size and the weight. The good news though is that the Oppo A53 is certainly tough enough to handle everyday life. You've got some light scratching down here around the bottom edge, but that's not bad considering it's been sort of knocking about Techspert towers for a couple of months now, and I've been using it full time for a week. Plastic backings, they do tend to scratch up a little bit, but that's not too bad. And around front, you've got a Gorilla Glass 3 coating across that display, and you've also got a pre-installed screen protector as well, just for added protection. If you actually turn the bugger on though, you'll find that like a lot of those cheapy Moto and Xiaomi phones, the Oppo A53 is still languishing on old Android 10. And the last update I saw from Oppo did not include the A53 and its Android 11 plans. It should get that update at some point though, because it is still a pretty fresh handset, but to be honest, I wouldn't expect much love beyond Android 11, if you know what I mean. Basically, don't hold your hopes up for a bit of Android 12 on this come the end of the year /2022. For now though, everything is fine. The Oppo A53 is still perfectly usable with that ColorOS launcher, adding bonus features like this nifty one-handed tool and some worthy face recognition to back up that rear fingerprint sensor. Again though, it is the old ColorOS version 7, which hopefully should get an upgrade to the latest ColorOS as soon as you get updated to Android 11. And as you can see, it doesn't mess too much with that stock Android vibe. You've still got an apps tray, thank God, to tidy all your stuff away, and you've still got that Google feed if you like a bit of that action. But of course, the settings menu with ColorOS is one of my major beefs. It's still an absolute state. Thankfully though, all of the features that you'd hope for and expect are present on the Oppo A53, including dual Wi-Fi support and NFC for your Google Pay action. You do only get 64 gigs of storage with the Oppo A53, which is half the amount you'll find in some rivals, the likes of the Motorola Moto G9 Power, but thankfully it does take micro SD memory cards to expand that by a further 256 gigs. And the A53 rocks a 6.5-inch IPS display, similar to that Moto G9 Power in that it's got an HD resolution, 1600 by 720. The visuals are still absolutely fine, they're not grainy or fuzzy. I was certainly happy enough streaming Netflix or Disney Plus shiz, but you can certainly notice the difference in detail levels compared with full HD rivals like the Poco M3, the Realme 7 and so on. It might not be a full HD display, but it does support 90Hz refresh rates, and it does run at that 90Hz level full time as well, unless you're running an incompatible app. I've got to say though, even with that 90Hz mode active, it doesn't feel as smooth as quite a lot of its other 90 or even 120Hz rivals like the Poco X3, stuff like that. As far as the screen brightness goes as well, it's absolutely fine on that maximum level. It's not exactly eye-searing though, and sometimes the auto brightness, like a lot of these budget phones, it does act a bit of a fool and does whatever its wonderful little heart desires basically. That's pretty much it for my complaints though. The colours on this display are quite punchy for an IPS screen. You can control the colour temperature to suit your preferences, you've got nice wide viewing angles, all that good stuff. You've also got a stereo speaker setup here on the Oppo A53 as well for your media. It doesn't seem to work for the likes of Skype though, just stuff like YouTube and when you're actually blasting music out of this thing. The top speaker is actually fairly decent for a stereo speaker setup. You know, it's not incredibly tinny or incredibly quiet like a lot of these budget bros with so-called stereo speakers. That's absolutely fine for, you know, a bit of Netflix, bit of YouTube or whatever, but if you are going to be listening to music, you're going to want to plug in with a bit of the headphone jack action down below. Otherwise, you've also got dependable Bluetooth 5 support as well, and absolutely no issues streaming music to the likes of speakers or headphones. Now, I've got to say, I wasn't expecting particularly great performance from the Oppo A53 as it uses Qualcomm's basic Snapdragon 460 chipset backed by 4 gigs of RAM. But thankfully, however, I found that the everyday experience was pleasingly smooth. You don't see many judders at all when you're flicking between apps and such forth. Everything works as it should, and I definitely preferred the performance here compared with the big rival, the Poco M3. You also get that dependable Adreno 610 GPU, so gaming in PubG or Call of Duty on those lower detail settings is an experience I rather liked. Aside from the parts where I got shot in the head by asshats like this little goddamn "Eat me you!" You've got a 120Hz touch response rate, which helps the action to feel fluid, and of course that ColorOS game space feature, which helps to keep your mind on killing wave after wave of these little bastards who should be doing their goddamn maths homework instead of playing games. One of the other undeniable highlights here on the Oppo A53 is that fantastic battery life as well. It's got a 5000 mAh, which is pretty standard for a budget blow. I know some rivals, the likes of the Poco M3 and the Moto G9 Power, have a bigger capacity cell, a 6000 mAh, but I found that this was just as good, if not better, to be perfectly honest. I found I would easily get 2 full days of use between charges. That's even with pretty intensive use, the likes of Skyping and you know, plenty of camera use, the kind of stuff that usually drains those batteries pretty quick, and that's with bugger loads of screen on time as well. And when you do finally manage to drain it, it's only got 18-watt fast charging, so not the nippiest around, but perfectly standard for this sort of price point. So let's finish up with a good old squint at that triple lens rear camera, which is headed up by a 13 megapixel primary sensor. Don't get too excited about the other lenses though. You've basically got a simple depth sensor and a piece of 2 megapixel macro effort that you'll find slapped on basically absolutely every budget smartphone for reasons. Everyday test shots taken by the Oppo A53 are generally pretty good for this price point. Colours are occasionally a little faded, but detail levels are respectable even if you try zooming in just to the 3x level. This is just a basic crop of your photo, of course. There's no telephoto action here, so you won't want to push in any more or else you'll just get some fuzzy blocky results. Moving subjects sometimes come out a little bit blurry, so kids are naturally great fun to shoot. Maybe just nail their feet to the floor and you'll probably do alright. And indoor shots are often grainy and warm, but I've seen far worse performance at this price. You've got the typical camera bonus modes like a portrait effort that usually works really well with little to no jank. Sadly, there's no night mode here, however, and that's a shame because the Oppo A53 definitely struggles in low light. Things get very soft and dark rather quick. There is, however, a pro mode that you can use to try and fiddle around with like the ISO levels and some of the other settings to correct some of the issues that you're seeing. It doesn't always work particularly well, but it is another option. For your video needs, you can only shoot full HD clips with the Oppo A53. There's no 4K option here, but I found that the home movies I grabbed with this thing were perfectly serviceable. The focus copes well with moving subjects. It just keeps things flat as you'd expect. There is some saturation in stronger lighting, but nothing too dramatic, and audio pickup was good front and back. It did the job nicely. And last up, that simple 8 megapixel selfie snapper struggles more than the rear camera when it comes to harsher conditions, often shitting its pants entirely when bright backgrounds are involved. Although the impact is definitely worsened when using the portrait mode, which otherwise does a good job. And at night you've got a screen flash feature thing, which I didn't absolutely hate. So that right there's my full final review of the Oppo A53, got there eventually, after using it as my full-time smartphone for a week. And I've got to say, I enjoyed it more than some big rivals like the Poco M3 and the Moto G9 Power. Certainly as far as the camera and the performance goes, I definitely thought it was a step up. The fact that it's dropped in price now as well means it's a bit of a bargain, so certainly if your budget is around that £150 mark, I could say you could do far worse than the Oppo A53. It's probably one of my favourites around right now. Anyhow, that's what I think. What do you guys reckon? If any of you actually been using the Oppo A53, it'd be great to hear from you down below. Leave your own little mini reviews, and please do poke subscribe, ding that notifications bell, and have yourselves a fantastic rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you.